This is Joel Pollack of Breitbart News, and today I'm going to discuss the media coverage of the explosion at a hospital in Gaza City that was initially blamed by terrorists and by the media on Israel. At about 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening, there was an explosion at the Al-Adi Baptist Hospital in Gaza City, and Hamas initially claimed that 500 people had been killed in an Israeli airstrike on the hospital. The media largely picked up that claim and ran with it. They published maps showing an Israeli attack on the hospital. World leaders condemned the attack and implied that Israel had been responsible. But the Israeli military said, hang on a second, our initial analysis suggests that this was not an Israeli airstrike. We were not operating in that area, and that this was most likely a Palestinian rocket fired by one of the terrorist groups that misfired and hit the hospital. That's actually a fairly common occurrence. In recent conflicts, something like 20% of Hamas rockets landed inside the Gaza Strip, and in 2022, 30% or so of the casualties on the Palestinian side were caused by misfired Palestinian rockets. There was also footage that aired live on media networks like Al Jazeera that appeared to show an errant rocket falling in Gaza. Surveillance cameras were also looking at Gaza and recording images, and people started uploading footage of those cameras to social media showing that a rocket appeared to have misfired. Well, the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, eventually came out and said, not only do we have that surveillance footage, not only do we have media footage, not only do we have our own drone footage, but we also have an intercepted phone call between two Palestinian Hamas terrorists discussing the fact that a rocket fired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another terror group, near the hospital had misfired and landed not on the hospital, but in the hospital parking lot.
بقول لك أول مرة بنشوف الصاروخ زي هيك والشظايا هذه فبقول لك تبع الجهاد الصواريخ الجهاد الإسلامي هاي. إيه؟ فهم بقولوا تعاون الجهاد الإسلامي. إنه من عنا هذا؟ شكله من عنا.
Later on, the Israeli military showed reporters photographs of the impact site, and they showed that the rocket hadn't actually hit the hospital and that it hadn't left the crater that an airstrike would leave. Israeli airstrikes, when they land on the ground, they leave a crater. This one simply burned a large area, and the speculation is that because it hadn't expended most of its rocket fuel, it still had a lot of that fuel when it hit the parking lot, and that caused the fire. It did cause injuries and casualties because Palestinian refugees had been hiding or taking shelter in the parking lot, but it was not an Israeli airstrike. Israel doesn't strike hospitals, and there actually would be no reason for Israel to do so precisely because of the international reaction that it provoked. But anyway, Israel also showed maps showing the flight path of rockets that had been fired from near the hospital, according to the radar that Israel uses to track the rockets and warn Israeli citizens and arm the Iron Dome to stop the rockets when they're over Israel. So the evidence was overwhelming that this was an errant rocket fired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And although President Joe Biden and the White House seemed not terribly eager to give Israelis the benefit of the doubt when Biden was flying to Israel on Air Force One and the reports of the hospital explosion first came out, by the time Biden landed, the Israelis had shown their American counterparts the evidence. And Biden said when he arrived in Israel that it looked like the explosion had been done by, quote unquote, the other team.
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
Now, that doesn't undo the damage of the propaganda that has been spread both by Hamas terrorists and by the international news media all around the world. There were riots in several Arab and Muslim capitals. People marched on the U.S. embassy. They stormed the Israeli embassy in Jordan. They tried to fire fireworks at a U.S. embassy in Turkey. So this is a major problem spread by fake news because journalists simply ran with a story that was given to them by terrorists and didn't wait for all the facts to come out. But that's how we can expect things to go in the coming days as Israel launches a ground war in Gaza. There will be more attempts at misinformation, and there will be more media outlets willing to go along with it, not just international outlets, but even American ones. There were journalists on Air Force One during a press briefing who actually asked the White House why they didn't delay Biden's visit to Israel because of this hospital explosion. They would rather have seen the president turn the plane around because of claims made by terrorists about a terrorist rocket that killed Palestinian civilians than have the president visit our closest ally to show solidarity in a time of war. That's the nature of reporting today. You can get the best information from Breitbart.com.